Hey, what's happening? Welcome to the Pleasure Points podcast. I'm your host, James Rohr. Thank you so much for being here. We have a great episode where Jenn and I dive in and we're talking about mental health and wellness. So one of the biggest distinctions that I encountered in my own life and that I make as a foundation of working with my clients. And so we just laid out pretty straightforward and simply in this episode. So this is a great one to remember. And if you find that it's helpful, you could share it to your people, write a review in iTunes. All of that is really helpful for us to spread the message. So, and also, if you're getting this live, Jenn and I are teaching a few mental health and wellness classes this week. So we have a class this Tuesday night, April 28th at 7 p.m. Eastern, and we're doing the same class Thursday morning, April 30th at 11 a.m. It's all about mental health and wellness. We're bringing in all of our expertise from a variety of modalities, and we've put it together in a really powerful class. So if you or someone you love has been challenged with keeping a good mood and being optimistic, this class should be really helpful. So you can hit us up on the social media channels or email the show pleasurepointspodcast@gmail.com and we'll send you the link. So stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you for being here. We love you and we'll talk to you soon. Enjoy the show.
Look at that dreadlock. Look how big this dreadlock is.
How does that happen?
Honestly, I don't know.
You're just neglecting self-care?
I woke up this morning and now I have this huge dreadlock.
Oh, it's so gross. You should just go full dreads.
Oh my gosh, how am I going to get this out?
We're going to move to Homestead. Let's start growing some weed and just go full hippie. I mean, if it were legal to grow weed here.
I don't know about that. I like my hair. But now...
You never did like the dreadlock thing in high school or college, did you?
No, I like brushing my hair. Apparently not this week, though, which is why I have a dreadlock right now. Awkward moment.
Can you carry on without your tending to your dreadlock right away?
Yeah, I'm okay. I just discovered it. It's shocking to me.
It's kind of like you have a pillow on the side of your head.
I know. I was wondering, I was like, why is it like a big knot right there? Gross. Okay. Well, might have to cut my hair later.
Wouldn't be the first person to cut your own hair in quarantine, though it certainly hasn't been me cutting my own hair. I'm going full fro.
Yeah, your hair is ridiculous right now. Every morning you wake up and I feel like I'm watching the Trolls movie.
Oh, jeez.
But you're adorable and cute, so it's like, oh, look at his cute hair and sing the song. Do it.
Let's see how long that lasts.
Well, then you put your hat on and it looks much better. Thank goodness.
Perhaps.
I'm just happy that you're not growing a mustache like your brother.
Ooh, yeah, the mustache craze is real.
Yeah, and you wore overalls. It's too much for me. I can't do it.
I almost put on the overalls that we have here yesterday.
Yeah, that's
just
shocking,
to do some
though.
Housework.
What's funny is that you and your brother both have a really strong happiness towards wearing overalls, which is shocking to me.
They're amazing. Gives room for the belly. You can like do those nice big inhale and exhale meditative breaths that we talk about with no restriction.
Yeah. Well, I get it because that's why women invented jumpers. I mean, truly, like you're like, why do you always wear jumpers? I'm like, because they're so comfortable. Exactly for that reason. It's no shame in a jumper. Yeah.
Until you can't get out of it in time to go to the bathroom.
That's true. The going to the bathroom part is where it gets a little bit weird for us, but it's worth it. Even then, it's still worth it. If you could do a jumper that's like an overall, that's even better. I guess it's just an overall.
So how does that work with like boob tape? Do they have to reapply tape if they take the jumper off? Like, because a lot of the jumpers are like kind of slutty up top. So
yeah, if
they have boob tape, so you got to like undo the whole thing, slide it down. And then is the boob tape adhesive enough to just like stick it back on? Or do you have to, are they walking around with like boob tape in the purse?
I've been known to resist going to the bathroom longer so that my boob tape will stick for more time. And
that sounds healthy.
Yeah. And so it does tend to lose its stickiness the more times that you unstick it. So you've got like a good, probably like 2, maybe 3 times where you can unstick your boob tape on your jumper before you've got to reapply. So yeah, you definitely carry boob tape in your purse.
That last time is kind of like, that's a high risk move. You'd be like, is it going to hold?
Yeah.
Is it going to hold?
And that's where, if you really care, then you would reapply. But luckily we live in Florida, so it's not uncommon to just have a little extra side boob hanging out. It's no big deal. It's true.
A little nip slip that's not a slip. Awesome. Okay, so let's once again, a smooth entrance into our episodes. But we want to actually make this a quick episode. You wouldn't know that by how we just started. But we wanted to touch base and check in with everybody on a topic that's certainly near and dear to my heart and to Jen's heart, and is sort of the backbone of a lot of what we do, which is mental health. And, just sort of check in and see how you guys are doing, how you're holding up. And we're just going to have a little conversation about it for a few minutes here.
For sure. Yeah, because nobody is, really too concerned about a lot of the things that we're normally concerned about, like, combing your hair, leaving the house. I definitely have not worn boob tape and my jumpers all quarantine. Because you don't need it.
I don't think you've actually gotten dressed outside of exercise clothes since we've been quarantined.
That's not true. I wore a dress the other day to make a video. And on Friday night, we had date night on Friday night.
Oh, yeah.
Because, I think it's important to shift the energy, because I think that, right now, as you were saying, this topic of mental health is near and dear to our hearts. And some of the things that, we've been doing is try to keep some sort of normalcy in our week. So, changing your clothes on a Friday to go have dinner in your kitchen on a Friday night is kind of nice. No boob tape required.
Yeah. It was good. As I'm thinking about, I've been spending way more time reading the news and just keeping track of what's happening. I've reconnected with a bunch of old high school friends. And so I see their stresses and chats, which has been really helpful for me because they're not at all in health and wellness.
Right.
I mean, they take care of themselves, but they are professionally, they're in a totally different thing. We got people in all different walks of professional choices. So it's great to just kind of hear what they're thinking about because, you and I can live in a very much an isolated echo chamber of health and wellness people.
That's true.
And what strikes me, one of the things that strikes me is that in all of this talk of COVID and sheltering in and everyone going out and how the immune system works and all this stuff, is that there just isn't the kind of attention that needs to be, I think, on what are the precipitating factors that have led us to have a population that is so full of comorbidities, that is so full of heart disease, obesity, diabetes, certainly cancer, high blood pressure. It's why, we know that is setting more people up to be more vulnerable to the virus. And yet, the conversation just isn't really moving in that direction. And obviously it's because it's challenging. It's nuanced. There's so many different variables and the socioeconomic things come into play and all of that. But really, I think one of the places where people can start making a change and it can have drastic ramifications in the improvement of their health is when it comes to their mental health and wellness.
100%. And I think that's something that is also really overlooked right now. I mean, just within my social sphere, just to echo back what you said, I'm so thankful that I have multiple communities where we have a chance to express our feelings and go over, some of the challenges that have been coming up for everybody in this time. And I think that even still today, it's almost more okay to be morbidly obese or to have heart disease or some sort of physical condition than it is to voice that you're struggling mentally and emotionally to someone. There's still this stigma that's attached to you really sharing your feelings and opening up in a more vulnerable space. So I think I'm so thankful that I have groups like the Her group where I can talk to other women about my feelings. Obviously, you and I are very deep in conversation about what we're feeling and what's coming up because we have so much experience with that. And we're, really, our entire relationship is designed to go deeper into what's the root, what's the underlying belief system that's causing one of us to be stuck and in a gentle, loving way, helping each other to move past that stuff, right? Just because that's what we do on our own and together. So I think that for me, what's been interesting is seeing the people that are struggling and then maybe are ashamed to say that they are struggling and that they are having feelings of perhaps tendencies, feelings that they've never had before. Like if they are reaching for the bottle a little bit more, if they are upping their prescription meds a little bit more, just because coping with this situation is really hard, And I think it's hard for people to talk about mental health conditions.
Yeah, for sure. It's a huge thing. And certainly Instagram and all that stuff doesn't help. People I think are, seeing other people, hopefully, maybe having an amazing time. And it's just the mental health stuff. I mean, there's more and more talk about it now, which I think is great. It has been a powerful movement. But I wanted to share with you guys a distinction that I've shared with my coaching clients, and other programs talk about it as well. And it's really I think the most powerful distinction that can be made when it comes to navigating mental health and wellness. And it's a distinction between what I call the data versus the story. And so when you're thinking about how do you know when you're not feeling as good? It might sound like a silly question, but for me, it's anytime I find myself being a little bit more short, less smiley, if I feel myself in a state of contraction, right? These are all indications that I've lost my balance somewhere I've gotten, out of sorts. And so in looking at that, if you start rewinding the tape in your morning or your night or whatever, asking yourself, okay, well, what happened, right? Whether it was something that was in your environment, like we talk a lot about, what is the thing that triggered the shift in my feeling, right? And it's worthwhile, I think, it's sometimes to kind of audit your day or your morning or your last few hours to try to find the thing that led to that shift in the energy. And when you are able to identify it, right? So there's what I call the data, which is just simply what happened. What was it? Jenn left a mess for the 50 millionth time in the kitchen.
50 millionth.
Right. So it's that's the data. The data is that there was a mess that was left. And then the real important thing here is what is the story that I'm writing about that? So
yeah, let's hear that story that you're writing about that.
Well, I'm so evolved that I don't write the story about that, right? I'm able to do that. But before, certainly in my first marriage, right, it was a different thing. I wasn't as attuned to all these things. And so the story could have been she doesn't care about me, right? Why is she always leaving a mess? She expects me to clean up after her, right? I'm the one who's always doing these things, right? I'm the one who's always doing blank, if you've got that martyrdom story, right? And so it's really the key to unraveling and to transforming some of the mental health stuff and to increase your endurance and increase your ability to be resilient is to identify what is the story that you write about it. Because the data is, in this case, right, Jenn left the mess on the kitchen, right? And a mess, even that is that's not even true data. The real data would be she left half of a spicy pepper, 3/4 of a tomato, lime that looked like it should have been thrown out 2 weeks ago, and a bunch of parsley on a cutting board that I was about to use.
I made a salad.
And
I was
the
eating
salad
my
was
salad.
also left all over the floor and the counters, right? And so
I was going to clean it up after I finished eating.
Right. And so, but even that, assigning the judgment of oh, she left a mess. It's no, she just left things out on the counter, and then I'm the one who's coming and judging it as a mess. And then and then you get the opportunity to observe what the story is. So what is the belief system there, right? Now, with my coaching clients, this could work out to they connect with some guy or a potential partner on a dating site or whatever. You go on a date, and then the person disappears. They ghost. Right. And so the data is this person didn't respond. And then what's the story? The story can be, well, I'm not good enough. He thought I was ugly. I said the wrong thing. I don't know what I'm doing. Dating is terrible. All men are unavailable. They can write all of these conclusions. And it's the story and the energy around the story that is going to lead to so much of the chaos. Because if we can just look at the data for what it is, which is Jenn left shit on the counter, or like, like I don't wash the sheets as much as she wants, right? Like whatever. It's like there's data points, and the data by itself is rarely emotional. It rarely has that emotional charge. It's the story that's happening is where we're adding all of the emotion to it.
Yeah. Like I leave out the food while I am eating it, and then I put it away after, and you leave the breadcrumbs on the counters, but I wipe that up and clean that up.
Yeah, for sure. We're using this example, I mean, jokingly, because, we joke about it too, but it's like, but these are the little things that really can add up, especially if if people are sheltering in with somebody else, right? It's like all of these little triggers can add up, and we don't even necessarily know like what it is.
100%. And I think that on a bigger scale, a deeper scale, right? We create these stories that we've been carrying since we were little kids. I mean, I had that huge breakthrough the other day that I, from a young girl, had the story ingrained in me that I had to always do my best and to give my best effort in order to succeed. And so because I put that story into my head, that my entire life I've worked so hard because my best is really good. My best is amazing. So if I'm not giving my best at something when I commit to it, then I have this, if I'm not able to fully deliver, right, then I have this sense of guilt or this sense of shame because I've written a story that if I don't do my best, if I'm not trying my best, then I won't succeed and I'll let people down or people won't love me or whatever other story that I wrote about that. And so it was really cool to have that breakthrough and the epiphany that I can do well and it doesn't have to be my best, and that I can let it be easy and I can be loved for that, and that I don't have to be the best. I don't have to be pushing myself. I don't have to be, perfect, or I don't have to be achieving at a certain level in order to be happy and be loved and to receive the abundance of the world. And that was huge for me this week.
Yeah.
And a great example of like, what was the story that I was writing every single day? What was that, because the truth is, sending an email or doing some of the work things it doesn't have to have, that's the data, right? It doesn't have to have all that energy, that story around some of the energetic charge that I was making it. Mm-hmm. It's totally huge.
Yeah. And that's how so much of it is like the key, I think one of it with the mental health and wellness is sometimes it's not about changing what we do. Like when I used to work over at Canyon Ranch, and I mean, shit, I've been teaching meditation since I was like 23. It's crazy. I used to work at Scripps Center for Executive Health and coaching their executives on mindfulness practices. And then we'd get people to come to the ranch, and oftentimes they'd be seeing a bunch of different practitioners. And there was this kind of like fear that I could sense from them that we were going to tell them that the way that they're living their life has to completely change. It was like they were afraid that if they were really to get healthy, they had to make a total 180, right? And for some people, maybe that is what they had to do. If they were afraid of that, right? There's something to look at there. But really, like the way I looked at it is because I'm a big fan of making the least amount of changes with the greatest amount of good, because I'm lazy that way. And I understand that change is difficult. Change can be challenging. But so much of like, especially with those executives, and I think for all of us, is it's not necessarily changing what you do, but it's about changing how you do it. Mm-hmm. And so if we can just look at it and be like, well, this is just what has to happen, and not have there be a whole story about it, right? Like I really enjoy doing the dishes. I mean, we're joking about like cleaning up, but like I've really, especially in this time, like been conditioning myself to use that as a time to express gratitude and to just be in a state of gratitude. Like, how great is it that I can stand without pain? Like, how thankful am I that we have running water and that we have natural soap? And how nice is it that like everything is working and the dishwasher works and like just all of these things, right? And it's like the data is like there's still like the kitchen has to be cleaned, right? But it's like, what's the energy that we do it with? And am I going into it full of resentment or full of frustration? Like, oh my God, I'm washing the dishes again, right? Or like, I have to do this again, right? We've got some kind of bug infestation. And I spent yesterday like hands and knees cleaning the entire patio, with paper towels and stuff. And it's like super gross.
Florida.
And I did like the whole thing. And then we woke up this morning and it was like, half of it was covered again with these bugs. And it's like, okay, well, I really want like a clean patio and I want to be able to keep track of what's going on. And so I was able to approach it today as I cleaned it up again this morning. like from the data was like, I needed to clean it. And then like the story was like, this is great. How grateful is it again that I can like be on my hands and knees, clean it. And like that it's working the way that I'm approaching to clean it. And like at the end, like how great is it that it's clean? Instead of being like, oh, these bugs, of course, like now like, oh, it's always us that this would happen to. And like, oh, nothing I do is ever good enough. And like, you could just totally go crazy into all of these other stories. And that's the place to look, is like, what is the story that I'm writing?
100%. And thank you so much for doing that. And I'm so thankful that what we're using to, naturally encourage those little guys to leave is working, and it's very helpful.
Yeah,
so thank you for doing that.
One area is much better. We'll see what happens with this other part of the patio.
Oh my gosh. Stay tuned, guys.
But so like, this process, and we've talked about it before in the podcast, is like this process of asking yourself, okay, what's the data and what's the story? This serves as a bit of a pattern interrupt. You're shining the light onto like the process. And sometimes, a lot of times when people first start working with me, they're not aware that that they're even doing that, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes it happens to me too. I can still get caught up in it. And it's like, oh, like, no, like the data was like why it didn't answer, right? Or like whatever. The data is the bill was higher than I thought, right? And then what's the story? There I get to pay attention. And just in becoming aware of the story, there's that pattern interrupt. Mm-hmm. And so in creating that shift, like, again, it comes back to one of the tools that I really, really like to both facilitate a shift, to get greater clarity of what the story is, and to reinforce that energetic shift, is using the essential oils.
100%. And I think that, one of the things that I see is that when those patterns, those subconscious patterns are running and those stories become piled one on top of each other, it literally becomes like rocks in a backpack. And it can cause so much stress that you are carrying this story of that you're a victim of your circumstances, and the heaviness that we create in our lives. I forget the famous quote, but it says that the only barriers that we have in our lives are the ones that we put on ourselves. And I really think that's true, because this exactly what you said is a perfect explanation of how we box ourselves in and how we carry these heavy stories. And I think that the effect on that, on our lives, it can be detrimental. People staying in jobs and relationships and living their lives in a way that is really horrible. Like, they just wake up in the morning, they feel so sad, they feel so angry, they feel frustrated throughout the day. There's little glimpses of happiness and joy coming in, because these stories are so heavy and so burdensome that they actually overtake everything else. And the perceived outside stress, in yoga world, we call them samskaras, or these life events that come in, right? Whether it's doing the dishes, or if you have, bugs on your patio, or in your plant, or whatever it is, or dreadlock in your hair, some of the examples we have. But those life events just happen. They come into our lives. We can't control them, but it's the reaction that we can control. But if the story is so deeply rooted, that unconscious patterning is so deeply rooted that we aren't even aware of the reaction that's happening. And that reaction is not only the story, but it's a chemical cascade in our body that is creating all of this stress and adrenaline and cortisol. And our bodies are literally, we feel like we're being attacked by a bear, when you're just doing the dishes. Mm-hmm. And it's like, doing the dishes is not a total life fight or flight situation where it's a life and death issue. It's just doing the dishes, but we make it that way because of these unconscious stories, and that burden can become unbearable for many people with suffering with anxiety and depression, and feeling the heaviness of the world, and loneliness and unworthiness, and feeling unlovable. I've definitely been talking to quite a few people where those deep stories and those deep sentiments are, wow, it's just really heavy.
Yeah. And I do believe that most, if not all, like physical imbalance has a root in the spiritual or the sort of the mental body. I don't even like those distinctions necessarily, but whatever, we can go with it. And so, things like obesity, things like heart disease, things like, inflammatory bowel disease, chronic pain, right? I think that it's a great opportunity if you're having some of these things to engage in that conversation with your body, which is like, the data is I'm overweight. What's the story about it? And then in understanding and shining a light on the story, then you're going to be able to break that pattern. And oftentimes these things can change. But, it's like going back to this coronavirus, these comorbidities, right? It's like, if we had more of an implementation and awareness of these stories that we tell ourselves, perhaps we wouldn't be so locked into these stories that then lead to, the body to break down or to be in a state of contraction. I was talking to a client the other day whose son is challenged with some digestive issues. And she says, the doctors don't know what it is. And my immediate reaction was like, well, that's great, because he's not locked into a diagnosis. And because he's not locked into a diagnosis, things can change quickly. He'll be able to, it's possible that it could go away overnight, unlike the experience that I had, which is they're like, you're going to have this disease forever, which then all of a sudden led to like way more sort of rebelling against the system and the diagnosis than was, fit for my sort of personality in the beginning in order to feel okay. But if you are struggling and you don't have a diagnosis, like, let's celebrate that, because that means that like anything is possible in your recovery. There's no set timeline that says that it might take forever. It might be something that can spontaneously heal.
Yeah. And I think that, even going back to some of the more mental things, just an example that as you were talking, I came up with this week has been, I have a friend that whenever I reach out to this person, I come at it from this place of sympathy, because I realize that I've actually been roped into their story, because there's always something wrong with this person. They're always feeling, they're having a hard day, or it's just they're really struggling, or they're dealing with something that is just so awful, right? And it's like some of those things are actually really challenging situations, family members that are sick or health concerns, that all of that is real. And also there's this deeper rooted story that I'm seeing a pattern that every time I talk to this person, that's what's coming up. And so it's interesting how we can actually participate in someone's story and help them, whether they have a diagnosed disease, a mental disorder, or whatever it is, by participating and playing into that story, and I wonder if there's some sort of a reward. I think that a lot of times when we get into these stories, or we get into this, I have this disease, or I have this diagnosis, so like this is the way my life is, or this is what I can't do because of that. The story becomes so big and so heavy that everybody around you is roped into it. And then there's some sort of reward that gets triggered from that. So maybe it's sympathy from a friend. Maybe it's someone checking in on you all the time to see if how you're doing, which makes you feel loved, because otherwise, if you were healthy, if you were happy, would people check in on you? Would people, offer their support and the extra help? Or is there a bigger reward in staying stuck in this old victim pattern, because people are like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. How can I help you? What can I do for you? And really playing that story up. So it's interesting when you're looking at the story to also look at what are you getting out of that story.
Yeah. What's the payoff? This is what I ask my clients all the time. What's the payoff? How does that work for you? Because I believe that once there's no payoff, it stops.
Sure.
Things change. And, for the chronic pain, like there's a payoff. And the payoff might be horrible. It might be super uncomfortable. You might wish that it would go away, but there's a payoff. Somehow it serves you. Whether it's reinforcing like the victim mentality, whether it's reinforcing the perpetrator mentality, like whatever it is, right? What's the payoff? And so maybe we should have a whole other separate podcast on that. That's like a whole other thing to unpack. But I wanted to let you guys know as we wrap up here that we are dedicating this week. Jenn and I are having a bunch of classes, and our team is teaching a bunch of different classes on how to use essential oils for mental health and wellness. So this particular week, if you're listening to this live as it comes out, Tuesday, what is the date? Tuesday.
Tuesday at 7 p.m. this week.
What is that? The
28th, I think.
So Tuesday the 28th at 7 p.m. Eastern, and then Thursday, April 30th at 11 a.m. Eastern. Jen and I are teaching mental health and wellness classes where we're going to be talking about a variety of different multidisciplinary techniques, breathing techniques, some stuff from yoga traditions. We're going to talk about acupressure, and then of course, the essential oils and how that fits into a super well-rounded and effective game plan to transform your mental health.
Yeah, because I think that it's hard to have awareness of the story when you're so entrenched in it. And if you can have a tool, as you suggested, that interrupts the pattern of the emotion and then also interrupts the chemical cascade that happens in the body, what happens is this magical moment of clarity where you can see yourself because you're not stuck in the normal patterning from the past. And so it's really, really cool. We're hopefully going to have a couple of friends come on these classes who have actually had incredible breakthroughs in their mental health very recently with the tools that we're sharing. And so I'm really, really excited for people to know that there is hope, there are options, and there are ways that you can naturally shift your state of being and to be able to let go of these stories, right? Because if you don't even know that you have a story that you're never good enough because when you were 5 years old, something happened to you, and for your whole life, you've been carrying this story that you're not good enough and that you'll never be able to do XYZ thing. And that's creating all these feelings of sadness and anxiousness and stress in your life. Maybe you feel hopeless every single day. And something very, very simple can actually shift you out of that state. And I don't think people realize that the possibility and the ease and the flow that is available to them if they have the right tools.
Well, they've got to be willing to live in a different story.
100%.
So the beauty is that we get to create stories all the time. So do we write the story that we're grateful to be able to do the dishes, or are we writing the story that like, oh man, it's another day? Right? Or a friend of mine has a bunch of horses, right? And he's got a shovel. He says he's shoveling shit all day. And he could hate the fact that he's got to do that, or he can love that he's got to do that. It's all in the story that we write. So if you're ready for a new story in your life and you can make it to one of these classes, we would love to see you there. So you can follow us on all the social media things. Jen's at Jennifer Panza. I'm at James E. Rohr. We're going to be posting the links there. You can email the show, pleasurepointspodcast@gmail.com, and we hope to see you there. And if we don't see you in that class and you need some extra help and support, feel free to reach out to us. And we'd love it if you shared the class and certainly this podcast with the people that you love if you find that this might be helpful for them. So thank you so much. Thank you, Jen, for being here, and we'll see you guys next time.